A story of betrayal, boundaries, and the courage to start over. The sound my body made hitting the bottom of those stairs, that hollow, sickening thud, was nothing compared to the silence that followed. My daughter stood at the top, chest heaving, eyes wild with something I didn't recognize. 23 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, school plays, and whispered prayers dissolved in that moment. She looked down at me crumpled against the baseboard and said, "You deserve it." Her name was Melissa, mine was Daniel, and nothing would ever be the same again. The man at the bottom of the stairs. Daniel Hartwell had always been a careful man. Careful with his money, careful with his words, careful with his heart. At 61 years old, he had earned the right to be careful. Life had taught him that lesson the hard way, through a divorce that cost him a decade of savings, through years of working double shifts at the manufacturing plant in Clover Ridge, Ohio, and through the quiet, grinding labor of raising 2 children mostly on his own after their mother, Sandra, left for a real estate developer named Greg when Melissa was 12 and his son, Owen, was 9. Daniel had not been a perfect father, he knew that. He worked too much, talked too little, and sometimes confused providing with parenting. But he had been present. He had shown up. Every parent-teacher conference, every basketball game Owen played, every school concert where Melissa stood in the back row of the choir looking for his face in the audience and finding it, always finding it, because Daniel Hartwell did not miss things that mattered. He had rebuilt his life slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything. A modest house on Sycamore Lane, paid off in full by the time he was 58. A small retirement account that he'd nursed carefully through 2 recessions. A vegetable garden in the backyard that he tended every spring with the same quiet devotion he gave to everything he loved. And a savings account, his emergency fund, his security blanket, the thing that let him sleep at night that had grown, over 20 years of discipline and sacrifice, to just over $47,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was his, every dollar of it earned, saved, protected. He lived simply. He didn't take lavish vacations or drive expensive cars. His 2014 Honda Civic had 140,000 miles on it and ran just fine, thank you very much. He ate at home most nights, cooked his own food, grew his own tomatoes. His one indulgence was a good cup of coffee in the morning, which he made himself with a second-hand espresso machine he'd bought at a garage sale and spent 2 weekends learning to fix. He was, by every reasonable measure, a content man. That contentment was about to be shattered by a Sunday afternoon phone call. Daddy, Marcus proposed. Melissa's voice on the phone was incandescent. Daniel had been in the garden when she called, kneeling in the dirt with a trowel in his hand, coaxing his first spring tomatoes into the earth. He pulled off his gardening glove and pressed the phone to his ear, and for a moment, hearing the pure joy in his daughter's voice, everything was exactly right with the world. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," he said, and he meant it. He genuinely liked Marcus Webb, a steady, good-natured man who worked in hospital administration and treated Melissa with a patient kindness that Daniel respected. When did he ask? "Last night, at Salvatier's, you know, that Italian place downtown I've been dying to try. He had them put the ring in my tiramisu, Daddy. I literally almost ate it." She laughed, that big Melissa laugh that started in her belly and took over her whole body, and Daniel laughed too, right there in his garden, dirt on his knees. "So what happens next?" he asked. "Well, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about," Melissa said, and something in her voice shifted just slightly, like a door quietly swinging closed. "We're thinking about the wedding, and Marcus and I have been talking about what we want. We want something really special, Daddy. Something beautiful and memorable." "Of course you do," Daniel said. "That's normal. We've been looking at venues." A pause. "The Rosewood Estate." Daniel knew the Rosewood Estate. Everyone in Clover Ridge knew the Rosewood Estate. It sat on 80 acres outside of town, a sprawling antebellum-style property with manicured gardens, and a white-columned reception hall that hosted charity galas and corporate retreats. Daniel had driven past it once and thought it looked like somewhere that charged more for the parking than he spent on groceries. "That's beautiful," he said carefully. "It is, right? And the caterer we want, they do this incredible 7-course meal, and the photographer is this guy who did Lifestyle magazine's wedding spread last fall." She was talking faster now, the way she always did when she was excited and nervous at the same time. "Daddy, we've put together a budget." "How much?" Daniel asked. He kept his voice neutral, calm. $30,000. The word 30 sat in the air between them for a long moment. Daniel set his trowel down in the dirt. He looked at his tomato seedlings, small and vulnerable in their little rows. He breathed. "And you're asking me to contribute," he said. "Well, Marcus's parents are giving us 10,000, Melissa said, "which is so generous, but we need the other 30 to make it work. And I know you've been saving, Daddy. I know you have money put aside. And I thought, for your only daughter's wedding." "Melissa," his voice was gentle but firm, "I have savings, yes, but that money is for my retirement, my medical expenses, my security for when I can't work anymore. I'm 61 years old." "You're in perfect health," she said, and now there was an edge entering her voice, something that hadn't been there at the start of the call. "Today I am," he said, "but that can change. And when it does, I need to be able to take care of myself. I can't give you $30,000. The silence on the other end of the phone was different from the warm, happy silence of just a few minutes before. This silence had temperature. It was cold. "I see," Melissa said. "I can give you something," Daniel said. "I'd love to give you something. I was thinking maybe." "I have to go." Her voice was clipped, professional, as if she were ending a business call with someone she didn't particularly respect. "We'll talk later." She hung up. Daniel sat in his garden for a long time after that, the phone still in his hand, looking at his tomatoes. The weeks that followed. He should have recognized the campaign for what it was. Looking back, Daniel could see it clearly, each maneuver, each escalation, each carefully applied pressure point. But when you're in the middle of it, when it's your own child applying the pressure, you keep finding reasons to believe it's something else. You keep telling yourself it will resolve. You keep waiting for the daughter you raised to come back. First came the calls. Melissa phoned every day for 2 weeks, and each conversation followed the same arc. Pleasantries, then the wedding, then the money, then thinly veiled disappointment when he held his position. She framed it differently each time. Sometimes it was about love, "Don't you want this day to be perfect for me?" Sometimes it was about legacy, "This is the most important day of my life, Daddy." Once, memorably, it was about fairness. "Marcus's parents are giving 10,000. You're giving nothing. How do you think that makes me look?" He tried each time to offer an alternative. He would give her 5,000, which he could manage without compromising his security. He would help pay for the flowers or the cake or the rehearsal dinner. He would contribute his time and his labor. He was handy. He could build things, decorate, help set up. None of it was what she wanted. Then came Sandra. His ex-wife called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual enough that Daniel nearly didn't answer. They spoke perhaps twice a year, at Christmas and on the kids' birthdays, brief and cordial exchanges that suited them both fine. "Daniel," Sandra said, "I've been talking to Melissa." "I figured," he said. "She's very upset." "I know. She feels like you don't care about her happiness." "Sandra," he kept his voice even, "I offered her $5,000. I offered to help in a dozen other ways. She wants 30,000, which is more than half my retirement savings. I can't do that." "You've always been so stubborn," Sandra said, not unkindly. "So worried about worst-case scenarios that you can't enjoy the present." "The present is fine," Daniel said. "It's the future I'm trying to protect." Sandra sighed. "She's your daughter, Daniel." I know who she is. After Sandra came Owen. His son was gentler about it, which somehow made it worse. Owen called on a Saturday and danced around the subject for 20 minutes before finally getting to the point. Melissa had asked him to intervene. He was uncomfortable doing it and said so. He also said quietly that he thought maybe Daniel should consider it. She's been crying every day, Owen said. I know, Daniel said. That's hard to hear. But Owen, when I'm 75 and my health is failing, that savings account is what keeps me from being a burden on you, on both of you. I'm not protecting it for myself. I'm protecting it for all of us. Owen was quiet for a moment. That's a fair point, he said finally. I'll talk to her. Whatever Owen said, it didn't help. Melissa stopped calling after that. The daily conversation simply ceased, replaced by an ominous quiet that Daniel found more unsettling than the arguments. He texted her twice. She replied with single-word answers. He asked if she wanted to have lunch. She said she was busy. He told himself to give her time. He told himself she was processing. He told himself that the daughter he knew, the girl who used to fall asleep in his lap during thunderstorms, who made him a Father's Day card every year until she was 19, who called him from college at 2 in the morning, when her first real relationship ended, and cried for an hour while he sat on his kitchen floor and listened. That daughter was still in there somewhere. He was still telling himself that the afternoon she came to his house. It was the kind of spring afternoon that makes you believe winter was worth it. Daniel had been working in the garden when he saw Melissa's car pull up. He felt a cautious, careful hope rise in his chest. Maybe she'd come to talk. Maybe she'd come to accept his offer of $5,000 to meet him somewhere in the middle. He pulled off his gloves and walked to the front door, brushing the dirt from his jeans. She looked beautiful, he thought. His daughter always had Sandra's looks: dark hair, wide-set eyes, a quality of brightness about her face even when she was angry. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and carrying a manila folder, which struck him as oddly formal. "Come in," he said. "I'll make coffee." She came in, but she didn't sit down. She stood in his foyer, clutching the folder with an expression he had not seen before on her face. Not anger exactly. Something more calculated than anger. Something cold. "I need you to look at these," she said, holding out the folder. He took it. Inside were printed pages, wedding venue contracts, catering proposals, photographer packages, everything itemized. The numbers were eye-watering. "Melissa, I've seen these numbers," he said gently. "Then you understand why I need the full $30,000. "I understand why you want it," he said. "I can't give it to you, but I want you to know my offer stands $5,000, which I'll give you gladly, and I'll do anything else I can to help." $5,000. She said it the way you'd repeat back something absurd. "Daddy, do you understand how insulting that is?" "I understand it's not what you hoped for." "It's nothing." Her voice was rising. "It's an insult. Marcus's parents are giving $10,000 and you're his girlfriend's father. You're the father of the bride. Do you understand what that means? What people will think?" "I don't make financial decisions based on what people will think," Daniel said. And he was aware, even as he said it, that it was exactly the kind of thing that would inflame her. That principled, reasonable tone that she had always, since childhood, found maddening when she was in a certain mood. "Of course you don't," she said. "Because you don't care. You've never cared about me. Not really. You were always too busy working, too busy saving, too busy protecting yourself to actually." "Melissa," his voice was still calm but firm, "that's not fair and you know it. What's not fair is having a father who won't show up for the most important day of my life." "I will show up," he said. "I will be there. I'll walk you down the aisle. I'll dance with you at the reception. I'll help you set up and tear down and do every single thing you need. What I won't do is give you money I can't afford to give." "You can afford it," she was shouting now, the folder still clenched in her hands. "You have $47,000 in savings. I know you do. Mom told me. Owen told me. You have the money and you're just choosing not to give it to me. He felt something shift inside him, not anger, but a deep, settled weariness. The kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. $30,000 is 2/3 of everything I have saved in my entire life, he said quietly. I started saving that money the year your mother left. I worked double shifts. I skipped vacations. I drove old cars. I did all of that so that when my body gives out, and someday it will, I won't be helpless. I won't be a burden. I won't be afraid. He paused. I'm sorry that's not enough for you, but I'm not going to apologize for protecting my future. The silence that followed was absolute. He watched something happen on her face, some internal decision being made, and then she turned and walked toward the stairs. He assumed to use the bathroom or to look at something. He didn't know why she was walking that way, and he followed, still talking, still trying to explain, still believing that if he could find the right words, he would never remember exactly how it happened. There was a hand on his chest, or his shoulder, both maybe. There was a shove, hard, deliberate, unmistakable, and then the world rotated without his permission and he was falling. The stairs were hardwood, 14 steps from the top landing to the foyer floor. He went down in a chaos of sound and pain and the terrible helplessness of a body in freefall, and then he hit the bottom with that hollow, sickening thud. He lay on his back looking up at the ceiling. His elbow was screaming, his ribs ached, his vision swam. At the top of the stairs, Melissa stood looking down at him. You deserve it, she said. He waited for her to come down, to run to him, to scream in horror at what she'd done. He waited for the daughter underneath the monster he was seeing to emerge, panicked and ashamed, hands reaching for him. Instead, she picked up the folder she'd dropped, smoothed her blouse, and walked out his front door. Part 4, The Wreckage. The paramedics arrived 11 minutes after Daniel managed to crawl to his phone. They found him in the foyer, unable to get up, left elbow broken in 2 places, 2 cracked ribs on his right side, and a laceration on his left temple where his head had glanced off the baseboard. Spinal imaging at Clover Ridge General came back clean. He had been extraordinarily lucky, the ER doctor told him, for a man of his age who had fallen down a full flight of stairs. Lucky, Daniel lay in the hospital bed and turned that word over in his mind. Owen arrived at the hospital at 9 o'clock that night, driving 3 hours from Columbus when Daniel finally called him. He came through the door white-faced and wild-eyed, and for a long moment after Daniel told him what happened, he simply stood there, unable to speak, unable to organize his face. She pushed you, Owen finally said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Down the stairs. Yes. Owen sat down in the hospital chair very slowly, as if his legs had stopped trusting themselves. He was 32 years old and had his father's quiet, deliberate nature, and for a long time he simply looked at his hands. I need to call her, he said finally. You don't have to. I need to call her. He stood up, stepped into the hallway. Daniel could see him through the glass, phone pressed to his ear, face very still, the way their father's face used to go still when something was beyond his capacity to respond to. The call lasted 4 minutes. Owen came back in and sat down. He said, She says you fell. She says you lost your footing at the top of the stairs and fell. She says she tried to grab you but couldn't catch you. Daniel said nothing. She says she was going to call for help but she panicked and left. He paused. She's sticking to that. I know what happened, Daniel said. I know you do, said Owen. The hospital kept him for 2 nights. Owen stayed for both of them, sleeping in the chair, and when Daniel was discharged, he drove him home and helped him get settled, stocking the refrigerator with groceries and setting up a system for Daniel to manage with one arm in a cast. He didn't press Daniel about what to do next. He just did what needed doing, quietly, the way he'd learned from watching his father for 30 years. On the second evening, Owen made dinner, nothing fancy, just scrambled eggs and toast. Daniel's old reliable when he didn't know what else to make for his kids, and they sat at the kitchen table together. "Are you going to call the police?" Owen asked. Daniel had been thinking about nothing else for 2 days. "She's my daughter," he said. "She broke your arm," Owen said, "not cruelly, just plainly. She could have killed you." "I know. She didn't come to the hospital, she didn't call you. She invented a story." "I know." Owen was quiet for a moment. "Dad, I love my sister, but I don't know who that person was on Sunday, and I think if you don't do something, she'll keep thinking it was okay." Daniel looked at his scrambled eggs. He thought about Melissa at 5 years old, refusing to go to sleep unless he sang her the same song every night, "You Are My Sunshine," which he had done willingly, without complaint, for 3 solid years. He thought about her at 17, bringing home a stray cat she'd found in a parking lot, arguing tearfully and successfully for its right to live in their home. He thought about the person she had been, and tried to reconcile it with the person who had walked out his front door while he lay at the bottom of his stairs. He could not reconcile them. "I'll talk to someone at the sheriff's office," he said. "I'm not going to make any decisions tonight." Owen nodded. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I'll support you." What a father decides. In the end, Daniel filed a report. He drove to the Clover Ridge Sheriff's Department 3 days after he was discharged, his arm in a cast and his ribs still aching when he breathed too deeply, and he sat across from a deputy named Torres and told her exactly what had happened. He was precise and unemotional. He described the argument, the shove, the fall, the words at the top of the stairs, the departure. He told her about the hospital and Melissa's alternative account. Deputy Torres listened carefully and took extensive notes. She told him his injuries were consistent with a fall downstairs and that without witnesses or other evidence, a criminal case would be difficult. She told him about options: a protective order, a civil case. She told him to consult an attorney. He had already made an appointment. The attorney, a practical woman named Helen Marsh, who had an office above the pharmacy on Main Street, laid out his options clearly and without drama. She told him that civil liability in assault cases was a real avenue, that his medical expenses from the incident were documentable, and that courts took elder abuse seriously. She also told him what he already knew, that the emotional and psychological cost of legal proceedings against a family member was significant, and that he needed to think carefully about what outcome he was actually looking for. "I don't want to destroy her," he told Helen Marsh. "I want her to understand what she did." "Those two things," Helen said gently, "are not always separable." He spent a long time, weeks, sitting with that. He went back to his garden, cast and all, doing what he could with one hand, watching his tomatoes grow. He sat on his back porch in the evenings with his coffee and watched the light change over the yard he'd kept for 20 years. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be, the kind of father, the kind of person who, when they looked back at a moment of profound betrayal, could say with certainty, "I handled that with integrity." He sent Melissa a letter. Not an email, a letter, handwritten, 3 pages, the kind of document that requires you to sit with your own thoughts long enough to know what they actually are. He told her that he loved her, that he had always loved her and would never stop, that he understood she was disappointed and frustrated, and that planning a wedding was stressful and expensive, and that she had wanted something from him he was unable to give. He understood all of that. He told her also that what she had done was not something he could pretend hadn't happened, that he lay at the bottom of those stairs for 11 minutes before he could reach his phone, that the words she had said to him, "You deserve it," were words he would hear for the rest of his life, that she had left without calling for help, that she had lied to her brother about what happened. He told her that he was not pressing criminal charges. That was a decision he'd made after long deliberation, and he wanted her to understand it was not because he believed what she'd done was acceptable, but because he was choosing, as he had always tried to choose, to respond to pain without creating more of it. He told her that he was, however, removing her from his life for the foreseeable future, not forever. He didn't know about forever, but for now he needed distance and she needed to reckon, honestly and seriously, with what she had done. He told her that when she was ready to have that conversation, a real conversation, not a negotiation, he would be here. He told her he loved her. He sealed the letter and mailed it. The long road back. Spring became summer. Daniel's ribs healed first, then his elbow, and on the day the cast came off he stood in the garden and flexed his fingers in the warm afternoon air and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Possibility. Owen called every week. Sometimes they talked about nothing, sports, the garden, a book Daniel was reading. Sometimes they talked about the real things, carefully, like men who had both learned the hard way that carefulness is not the same as cowardice. Owen had not spoken to Melissa in 2 months. That was his own decision, arrived at without pressure from Daniel, and it sat between them, a grief they shared, an absence neither had fully named. Daniel saw a therapist. This was Owen's suggestion, offered so gently that Daniel almost didn't notice it was a suggestion at all, and Daniel resisted it for exactly 1 week before acknowledging to himself that a man who'd been pushed down his stairs by his daughter and was trying to figure out how to live with that probably had good reasons to talk to someone. The therapist's name was Dr. Gloria Reyes, and she was direct in a way Daniel found immediately trustworthy. She didn't soften things or wrap them in language that made them easier to swallow. She asked him hard questions and waited patiently while he found hard answers. She asked him about Sandra leaving, about the years of raising his children alone, about the ways he had learned to equate money with security and security with love. She asked him once in their 5th session, "When was the last time someone took care of you?" He thought about it for a long time. "I can't remember," he said honestly. "That's worth sitting with," she said. He sat with it. He sat with a great many things that summer. In his garden and on his porch and in the long, quiet evenings that used to feel lonely and had started slowly to feel like something else, like space, like room to breathe. He started having Owen's family. Owen had married 2 years ago, a warm and funny woman named Priya who had taken to Daniel immediately and called him Dad, with a naturalness that always caught him slightly off guard over for Sunday dinners. It started as a practical thing, Owen checking in on his father, but it became something they all looked forward to. Daniel cooked. Priya brought dessert. They ate on the back porch when the weather allowed, and the conversations wandered over the whole terrain of life, easy and difficult, funny and serious. And Daniel found himself in those evenings more content than he had been in years. He made a new friend that summer too, a retired schoolteacher named Robert who lived 2 streets over and had started gardening in his 60s with the fervent enthusiasm of a convert. They fell into the habit of walking together in the mornings and arguing companionably about tomato cultivation. And it was, Daniel reflected, the simplest and most uncomplicated friendship he'd had since before Sandra left. He was not happy in a spectacular way. He was not healed in any final sense. Some nights he still woke at 3 in the morning and lay in the dark hearing those 14 steps, feeling the absence of his daughter in a way that was like an injury, dull and persistent, and not quite gone. But he was living. He was choosing to keep living forward with intention. And he was, to his own quiet surprise, at peace with the money. Not because it hadn't mattered, it had. It mattered enormously, not the amount itself but what it represented, the years of sacrifice, the discipline, the particular kind of love that shows itself through provision and protection rather than grand gestures. He had wanted, he realized in Dr. Ray's office one September afternoon, to be seen for that love. He had wanted Melissa to understand the gift he was offering, even if it wasn't the gift she wanted. He had wanted to be understood. "You can't make someone see you," Dr. Ray said. "No," he agreed, "but you can stop twisting yourself trying." The letter that came in October. He almost didn't open it. He recognized Melissa's handwriting on the envelope. She'd always had that loopy, exuberant penmanship that hadn't changed since middle school, and he stood in his foyer for a full minute before walking to the kitchen table and sitting down and slitting it open. It was 4 pages. He read it twice. She did not make excuses. That was the first thing that surprised him. He had half expected some version of her alternative account, the lost footing, the failed grab, or some elaborate reframing of events that centered her pain and minimized his. What he got instead was a 4-page reckoning that was clearly the product of its own long, difficult season. She said she had been seeing a therapist. She said that in those sessions she had said out loud, for the first time, exactly what she had done, and that hearing herself say it not to Marcus, who had already heard the softened version, but to a neutral professional who was not going to let her off the hook, had been the most ashamed she had ever been in her life. She wrote, "I told myself for a long time that I didn't push you, that it was an accident, that I panicked and left because I was scared, not because some part of me was still angry. I don't believe that anymore. I know what I did. I know that I did it on purpose, and I know that I left you there." She wrote about the wedding, about how in the months since she and Marcus had scaled everything back, a smaller venue, a simpler menu, contributions from their own savings and what his parents offered and nothing else. She wrote that she had not understood, until she spent her own months working towards something, how different it felt to earn a thing versus to expect it. She did not ask him to forgive her. She said explicitly that she didn't think she had the right to ask. She said she was writing because she wanted him to know that she knew, that she understood, that she was going to spend a long time trying to become someone who didn't do things like that. At the very end she wrote, "I don't expect anything from you, Daddy. I just wanted you to know that I hear you. I think I finally hear you." Daniel folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. He sat for a long time in his kitchen, in the autumn light that came through the window he'd cleaned just last week, making everything look clear and bright. He wasn't ready to call her. He wasn't sure when he would be, or if the version of their relationship that existed before that Sunday in April would ever fully reconstitute itself. Some things, once broken, don't go back together the same way. They become something else, different in shape, changed by the fracture, sometimes stronger in the broken places and sometimes not. But he thought, "She hears me." After everything, the fall and the silence and the months of distance and the careful, difficult work of healing, that was something. That was, perhaps, enough to begin with. The garden in spring. The following April, Daniel planted his tomatoes. He did it on the same weekend he always did, following the same rhythms he'd followed for 20 years, soil preparation first, then the seedlings, then the careful business of arrangement, each plant given exactly the space it needed to grow without crowding what grew beside it. Owen and Priya came for the weekend and helped, though Owen's gardening was, as ever, more enthusiastic than technically sound. Priya turned out to have a gift for it, patient and precise, her hands gentle with the seedlings, and Daniel found himself teaching her things he hadn't shared with anyone in years, small pieces of knowledge accumulated over decades of trial and error. His phone was on the porch railing. At 2 in the afternoon it buzzed. He walked over and looked at the screen. "Happy spring, I hope the garden is beautiful, M." He stood there a moment, dirt on his hands, sunlight on the yard, his son and daughter-in-law working in the earth behind him, and he thought about what to write back. He thought about 14 steps and a manila folder, and a word that had no business being said out loud between a father and his child. He thought about hospital lights and cast removal and early morning sessions with Dr. Ray's and Sunday dinners on the back porch, and a letter he'd read twice at his kitchen table in October. He thought about a little girl who needed a song to fall asleep, and the man who had sung it, not because it was convenient or comfortable, but because she was his and he was hers, and that was what you did. He typed back, "It's coming along, the tomatoes are in." A moment passed. "Good," she replied. "I'm glad." He put the phone down and went back to his garden. The tomatoes were small and new, still finding their footing in the turned earth, reaching without quite knowing yet how to reach toward the thing they needed. But the conditions were right. The soil was prepared. The light was good. Given enough of all of those things, Daniel knew from long experience, almost anything could grow.